Hello and welcome to HiFi LoFi. This is episode 1. I've started this channel as I am spending a lot more time at home, and if you're under lockdown then no doubt you will be using your hi-fi equipment a lot more these days. And I have a budget system which I'm using. You can see that set up behind me. I've just set it up, and what I'm hoping to do with these videos is really go on a journey exploring my hi-fi audio equipment and really trying to find out about the different types of equipment, the different and the whole world of audiophilia. And I'm not really that au fait with all the names, the brands. I know quite a few things, but not enough, and I don't really know how to get the best out of my equipment. So what I'm hoping to do is, if you can join me on this, put the comments below and help me get the best out of my system within the rather small budget, because times are hard, aren't they? And a lot of I'm self-employed, a lot of my work's dried up. So and also, when this coronavirus thing hit, and here in Japan, I live in Japan, this they call it the corona shock. When this coronavirus hit and the corona shock hit, and the corona shock, the shock refers to the financial disaster that has come with it, the terrible recession that we're all in now. I was actually in the midst of house renovations, and unfortunately I've not been able to continue with those. Some of it I'm doing myself, but some of the more difficult structural work I'm leaving to professionals, and unfortunately I can't afford to continue with it at the moment. So you are also looking at my living room, which is partly renovated, and as I said, some things I'm doing myself, easy stuff like painting and the superficial stuff. But anyway, because I'm spending a lot of time at home, I'm definitely going to be trying to get the best out of my hi-fi. And I love music. I'm always listening to music, and I've been keen on high quality audio sound as much as possible since I was rather young. My father was in the hi-fi trade, and my father had very high-end equipment, and I suppose I grew up with that, and therefore was unwilling to settle for too much of a low-grade system. So, as I said, please join me on this. Please keep the comments. Please keep the comments informative, because that's what it's all about. I'd like to know really how to get the best out of my system, and I've got some gear which has arrived which is unopened, so we shall be looking at some of the boxes, opening those together, and we shall be comparing. So I'm really going into this with very little research done. So what I'm going to do is try different combinations, try different equipment, compare formats, and I do like vintage hi-fi also, and I suppose my aspiring audiophile days, or my audiophiling training days perhaps, were the 1980s in terms of when I first started dabbling with my own equipment, and that was an Akai radio cassette player, portable radio cassette player, which some people now call a boombox. Back in those days we didn't use the word boombox, but we sometimes refer to it as a ghetto blaster, which also sounds American, but certainly in London in the 1980s it was either a radio cassette player or it was called a ghetto blaster amongst friends. And that was actually that was my second piece of audio equipment, because the first one was a much older mono cassette player, a Philips mono cassette player with piano keys, which I'm going to dig out at some point and show you, because I do still have it, but it's packed away somewhere, and I've got a rough idea where it is, and I shall dig it out, and in a future video we shall look at that and see if it's still working. That would be really amazing. So what you can see behind me is my budget system, and it's we're going to take a closer look and in a moment. So it's an Onkyo system with some new speakers. The Onkyo stuff is of course not new, and the Onkyo stuff is the Intec 205 series. You can also see below that arrived today an Intec 275 CD player, and I'm going to be assembling my well, it's not new, it's new to me, an Intec 275 system, and I'm going to compare it with the Intec 205 system in a video coming very soon. The speakers, by the way, are new speakers. They are Dali Spectre 2 speakers. I looked up on the internet, I did some research, and they seem to be the best value for money, because I was looking for a pair of budget speakers, and they certainly seem to be the best value for money. And we shall talk about those too. And at some point, of course, I'm hoping to get the higher end stuff rigged up again, and I've even got some new audio racks for that system. And as I said, we shall be doing this together, exploring this together, and trying to get the best out of everything. Yes, it's going to be a journey. So let's take a closer look at the Onkyo 205 stuff that you can see down there. Okay, so this is the amp. It's a pre-main amp in the Intec 205 series, and it's the A933. It's very heavy actually, and as I said, this is just an overview of the budget system. We shall be looking at everything in more detail in a future video. This is episode 1. The amp is A933. There are several amps in the Intec 205 series. This was the latest model that I could find when I was searching for amps in the Intec 205 series, and I don't know whether there is a later amp than this. I think this is as I said, the A933 FX. Yep, just looking closely at the front of the amp, you can see on the bottom right corner there, it's the A933 FX. There are other model numbers, and as I said, this is the latest one I could find. Actually, there was a slightly later one, the A933 FX2, that I found on the internet, but unfortunately the condition looked poor, so I opted for this one. And I'll give you the spec when I go through them all in more detail in a future video. Okay, so now we're looking at the CD player. This is the C705 FX2, which you should be able to see on the bottom right corner. And this CD player, again, I I don't know whether it's the latest one in the series, but it was a really reasonable price. And of course, all the Intec 205 series, they are all the same width. They vary in height, and I think the lengths, or when I say the length, I mean the depth. You know, how far it goes back on the shelf. I think they are all about the same as well, but the CD player and the amp are about the same height, and they are taller than the other two. So this is the MD deck, and it is very rare indeed, because it's one of only two, as far as I'm aware, one of only two MD decks that were ever made. I'm not even aware that Sony made a high MD deck. Of course, Sony did make high MD Walkmans, but as far as I'm aware, only Onkyo made high MD decks. But again, if I'm wrong, please put it in the comments and back it up with links, or at least information that can be checked. Now, a high MD deck, for those who don't know, is, well, first of all, it can take high MDs, which are much higher capacity, and high MD can record PCM. That's, you know, same as wave, isn't it? PCM. Again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. And you can get the identical recording, an identical copy from a CD, or I suppose any other source that you care to record from, because I have actually recorded some FLAC files that I'd ripped from CDs and put on my computer, and then I'd record them. I have recorded some onto some MDs, MD being mini disc, of course. So very exciting it was indeed when I first found this deck, and I found it by chance in a used shop, and it was quite reasonable, and I bought it, I'm trying to think when I bought it, a few years ago. Now if you try to find them, they're not only are they extremely rare, but they're very expensive. And believe it or not, I do in fact have the other high MD deck made by Onkyo in the Intec 275 series. So we shall be looking at that. We shall be unboxing it and looking at it, and we're going to make some recordings on it, and we're going to compare the two decks and compare high MD with other formats. Okay, last but not least in the Intec 205 budget system that I have, we have the cassette deck. There are, by the way, other Intec 205 machines. There's a tuner, there's a sound processor, there's a CD recorder, there's a DVD and CD player, and there's also a twin cassette deck, which I did see the other day, and I was very tempted to buy it, and I'm going to go back and see if it's there, because I am thinking about adding it to my collection. But anyway, this is the cassette deck. This cassette deck has Dolby B, Dolby C and HX Pro. It also automatically recognizes cassette tape types, so it can, and it handles, well, as far as I'm aware, it handles all four tape types. If there are more than 4 types, I'm sorry, please tell me. So it handles, of course, everything. I think every tape deck handles normal. It handles type 2, that's high position type 2 chrome, and it handles metal type 4 position metal tapes. I don't know whether it handles type 3. They seem to be elusive. I've never seen a type 3 cassette tape. I don't know whether it can handle those. I doubt I will ever have a type 3 cassette tape, but I am on the lookout for them. And this cassette tape deck sounds alright. I quite like it, and we're going to look at that. We're going to play it. I have used all of these, but not a lot. And as I said, this is my budget system, and we should look at the speakers. So as I said before, these are the Dali Spectre 2. They're new to me. I don't know if speakers require a running in time. If they do require a running in time, then that may not be, they may not be running at their best yet. There is some debate as to whether audio gear requires running in time. Again, let me know what you think. And what would be, I have no idea what would be the running in time for these. I suppose now I've used them probably about 10 hours of playtime. I think they sound good. They're very dynamic. I'm not impressed with the soundstage, but at the moment I don't know whether that is to do with the amp. So I will be connecting them to another system to compare. You can see an old iPhone there, which I'm using to play just out of convenience. I just play from actually sometimes VLC, sometimes iTunes. If I slide across here, yeah, there's my old TV. I've had this Panasonic Viera for quite a while. I've had it for over 13 years. When I bought it, it was already an old model, and it's got a few marks on the screen now. But who did that? I don't know. Nobody's ever owned up to that. But yeah, it's a 32-inch, which was very expensive 13 years ago, and they're quite cheap now, aren't they? But the TV is not connected to an antenna, by the way. It's connected to the PC, which is connected to the internet, and behind the TV is my son's PlayStation, and he plays his PlayStation connected to this TV. The sound's pretty good at this TV, actually, very impressive. Okay, so there we are. So there's the Intec 205 system, an overview, and we shall be looking in more detail. As I said, this is today just an introduction and an overview. Oh, and there's the Intec 275 CD player, which arrived today. I've already unboxed it, sorry about that. But we will be unboxing some machines, some gear together, and looking at them all together. So as I said, this is a journey. There'll be many more episodes looking at all of this, and I'm going to try to do a video out and about looking at some vintage audio, and if the shop staff let me, perhaps do some filming in the shops. Not just vintage stuff, looking at some new stuff as well. I do have some new stuff as well. Okay, so if you want to see more of this, please like and subscribe, so at least I know that it's worth spending the time making these videos. But even if nobody ever watches them, I consider these to be a kind of video diary of my own personal journey through hi-fi, especially during the lockdown.